G'day and welcome to David Joshua Ford Live episode 99, and on today's show we're talking about the M4 Mac Mini as a live streaming server that you can use headless, so that's not any sort of keyboard or mouse. And I'm going to look at how I've gone into my network control and sort of set that up, and then what I'm putting on the Mac Mini as a server, and also what I'm keeping on my desktop to run from there. If you're new to the channel, drop me a chat and say hi, where you're from, and if you have any questions today as we go through, we'd love to answer them. Well, it was just towards the end of last year that I picked up a Mac Mini M4 Pro, and I've been using that in my live stream setup, and I absolutely love it because it's been able to get some of those applications that just need to run all the time and get them into the background and free up my main computer. Probably not so much from the processing point of view. I think my computer was fine with that. It's just more, it simplifies what I'm looking at on my desktop, and it means there's a computer that is always on. I got the M4 Pro version, but you could certainly do what I'm going to show you today with just a regular Mac Mini bottom of the line. I just got a more powerful one because I also want to use it as an encoder and things for Davinci Resolve and media management. So I've got the 10 gigabit Ethernet in there, and also the Pro chip just for faster processing. But the live streaming aspect of it is pretty easy. So let's take a little overview of today. So it's really looking at what if you are moving on from running your live stream setup, maybe something like Companion with a Stream Deck on a local computer, and you're going more remote. So you have a computer that is attached to a Stream Deck, maybe running Companion satellite through to another computer. And now we're going to look at getting rid of that second computer and basically running the Mac Mini as a server. And so we don't actually sort of need to access it at all, and we can access this remotely over a VPN or Wi-Fi, and also wouldn't need a keyboard or mouse or screen because we can look at this from our base computer just through the screen sharing app. And then we'll take a look at what applications I've got on my Mac Mini, and also the ones that I have kept on my local desktop, and just look at the sort of ways in which we manage that. All right, let's kick off and take a look at the network control. And I'm going to run you through the setup that I have here for Companion, and we'll go through the story of growth of a studio, and just so we can get an idea of why we arrived at this situation. So maybe that's you at your desk and you got a computer, and then you get yourself a, let me just click on the right screen here. You get yourself a Stream Deck. So many different versions now. A Stream Deck XL, and you've connected that via USB to a computer, and you're running something like Companion, so you can control all of your equipment with that, and you're just running that locally. So it's fairly simple, and it's improved your life a lot. But then you go and you add in maybe another computer running something like VLC or H2R, so that those video outputs are off your computer and you can access this via the network. But then what happens if you have a remote Stream Deck? Well, that's where you need Companion satellite, because USB length is 15 feet maximum. So we want a short cable from the Stream Deck through to our local computer, and then we're going to use Companion satellite to access Companion remotely, and we're really just using this as a server. And so by this point we could get rid of the laptop or whatever we're running it on, and that's where the headless Mac Mini comes into this scenario. And this is kind of what I have today, where I have my workstation, which is running my laptop and Companion satellite with a Stream Deck, a couple of Stream Decks, and then just over Ethernet. You could do it over Wi-Fi, but if you have Ethernet, definitely do that. Then that is where you are connecting back to some sort of rack that has a switch in it connected to a router to manage the IP addresses, to give you internet connection, and then the Mac Mini is sitting in that rack. So we're using Stream Deck to the computer, and then back to the Mac Mini as a server. And this also goes for if you wanted to run it over Wi-Fi, or even if you're not in the studio at all, you could be somewhere completely other side of the world. I mean, I used this scenario a couple of weeks ago when I was in Australia. I was able to use my computer and log in via the VPN into the studio here, and then I had full control of the studio and was able to sort of manage the computer completely remotely. So you might be wondering, if we don't have a keyboard or a screen attached, how do we see that? Well, that's where we're going to have a screen sharing application, which is on all Macs. Sorry, Windows. I'm sort of stuck on Mac computers in terms of my knowledge base here, but all computers have this, and so that's where you can access that in the screen sharing app. And then we've got, these are the apps that we're going to put onto the Livestream server, and these are the ones we're going to connect it through. So let's jump into part 2, and let's take a look at the Mac Mini itself and what are the applications that I have moved from my main computer here across to the Mac Mini. And then in the next part, we'll look at what is stayed on my local computer here. So as I was mentioning here, these are basically the applications, and I'll run through all of these. So Companion is running on the Mac Mini. I've also got Light Key to control the lights in the background, VLC. I've got Chrome with some sheets to give me a sort of teleprompter look, and also a teleprompter app if I want more of a scrolling teleprompter. And then all my graphics are coming via H2R Graphics on another HDMI and scraping the YouTube comments from Social Ninja. So this is what that looks like and what the applications are connected to. I've got 3 HDMI outputs from the Mac Mini. So I've got a video playback screen on VLC and the teleprompter screen for HDMI 2, and then a Chroma screen HDMI out from H2R that then brings on the graphics as needed. So that's sort of basically all of the apps that I have moved across. All right, so let's kick this off, and we're going to start by looking at Companion as an always-on server, because Companion's really the heart and soul of what I'm doing here, and it is controlling all of the hardware. So let me go to over here. So I'm just going to hide this one. No, not that one. Let me just minimize that. And we're going to go to my desktop. So this is my desktop. This is the screen sharing app. And if I click on that, you can see basically it'll bring up your computer, and you would just connect to the address. So my address here is 192.168.7.11. So you need to find the address of your Mac Mini on the network, put in your credentials, and when you open it up, you'll get a screen like this, which is basically a virtual desktop screen. And because I've got 3 HDMIs connected, I've got 3 screens. Otherwise, I would just have 1 screen. So these are the ones I talked about before in terms of having a desktop / VLC on the first one, and then the second one is my teleprompter screen, and then the third one is my graphics overlay. And let's just start off by looking at number 1. So I'm going to go here to display 1, and this is a window within a window. And so we can click on, I'm going to go to Safari just because it's I'm using Chrome for something else, but basically any sort of web browser, I can access the GUI. You'll see here under Companion, so I've got Companion 3.5.2 running, and that'll be up here, and you can show hide window. And so that is just running in the background of this computer, and then I can access that across the network, and I'll sort of get to that in a bit. So that's Companion. The next one is light key. So I'm using ArtNet protocol over Ethernet to a DMX box. So it's outputting sort of 5-pin DMX cable that's going around to the lights here. So if I go to light key, this application just has to be open, and it could be on any computer in my network. So I move this off my desktop, put on the Mac Mini, so it's just kind of there and running, and I can kind of, click on this interface and control it on the Mac Mini. But what I'm actually doing is using the Stream Deck. Straighten up my shot here. So under light key, I can get all of the same controls. So if I wanted to go to like the blue background of the lights here and back to the yellow one, I don't need to access the application. All of that is manually available on the Stream Deck, or else is built into my show's automation for the lighting cues. So that's why I don't really sort of have need of that on my main computer. And it just means it can be open and sitting there, and I can use my main computer for like editing, and I can restart it and take it elsewhere, and I don't have to worry about getting all these applications open again before a live stream. So that is the light key. The next one is VLC, which I was using for show music, but you can also use it for video playback. These days I'm sort of playing everything just off the Hyperdeck because it's a bit more simple to program. VLC sometimes can go to funny screens. So the way that I've got that set up is, again, if we went to, hopefully this will work. I'm going to go to my all displays here. So I've got the VLC to play into this screen here. It's going to be very small down here. Should have done this the other way around. Where did that go? VLC. VLC. So I got a couple of things in my playlist there, and I've got that connected to input 6 on my ATEM constellation, but coming out of HDMI 1 from the computer. So again, rather than having to, on my main computer, have multiple HDMI outs for graphics and video playback, I can move all of those HDMI cables onto the Mac Mini in the rack. So it's a much smaller HDMI cable length. And again, it just sort of frees up my desktop to do other things. But because it's network-based, that is where we run the VLC from. And so if I go to my, what's good to show here, I guess you can see my screen from here. So we're on camera 1 at the moment, and we're gonna go to VLC, and I could cut to a drone video like so, which I think, again, with my, sometimes gets funny with the Surface Bar. So it's drone video, or I can hit stop and I'll come back onto screen. And so, video playback without having to worry about hooking my main computer up to it, because it's always connected. Otherwise, I just use that desktop, or the first mini desktop, really as like a back-end console to control things with. All right, let me jump back over to here. And so those VLC, and then the next one is the Teleprompter. So I have been using an app called Teleprompter, and again, that just, the main thing about it was I needed an HDMI out from my desktop computer, and I just wanted to move that into the rack. So again, cut down on a HDMI cable, and then I can control it over the network. So from the desktop point of view, I've got, and I'll come to this in a bit, but on my local computer, I've got the Teleprompter app to control it down here. And then on my Mac Mini, this is where I basically have this application open. And then once that application's open, I can actually just run it locally on my computer here. So I can, copy and paste text and do USB control with this kind of, have we got this right? This kind of jog wheel type thing, like a contour shuttle, which is USB into my local computer. So again, it's giving me control at my local computer, but then the connection is via the network to the rack, where it's then a HDMI to SDI conversion into the multi-view so that I can bring that up on the screen. So that's where that would go full screen on this HDMI 2. But more recently, I have been using Google Sheets, and I was talking about this recently, as cue cards rather than a sort of scrolling teleprompter. Scrolling teleprompter is great if you've got a lot of text and if you've got some assistant who is, turning the dial and keeping on track with the words. But I think for what I'm doing here in terms of self-directing and self-presenting, having cue cards on a screen gives me much more flexibility. So what that looks like on my multi-view that I have here is this kind of thing. So I've got my program view on this side, and then I've got output number 7, I think it was, or HDMI 2 from my Mac Mini. And that is running just a Google Sheets in a big screen. And so I can get an idea of what's next. We're going to talk about H2R Graphics. And I can also Luma key out that because it's a black background. So let me just get back to my program so we don't lose you. And then the way that this is working, again, in my DJF log that's available on my website, this will be an update that will come at some point because I've got my DJF queue, which is sort of running technical queues here. But then in conjunction with that, I've got my Google Sheets list. So these are like what's next here. So if I click this button, it's going to advance the Google Sheets onto the next list. So I'll bring that over here so you can have a look at what I've got. Macs, I swear, they always go weird resizing. Okay, so I've basically got a spreadsheet here, which is pulling each line as like a new cue card, and then it is putting that up into the graphics here, as well as pulling that for metadata for logging and YouTube to kind of add this as chapter markers. So if you're watching after the stream, you should be able to jump around into these comments, which have been timestamped correctly by what I've built in Companion as we've gone along, and I don't have to think about that too much. All right, I'm gonna move this one off screen. Oh, man, the Macs always resize the windows and get a little funky. And I'll get back into that sort of screen and how I control it from the other computer in a little bit. But the next application that I have is H2R Graphics. So again, this was previously on my local computer, and it meant having an HDMI output from this desktop computer, running that all the way into the rack. And that was a full screen green Chroma. And then the ATEM is cutting out the green to leave the graphics, so that if we bring on comments, that they will show up. And so if we go back over to here, this is where you can see my third HDMI is just solid green. And then if I use something like my iPad, I can bring up, comments. I had a test comment here before. So a Social Stream Ninja, just like test comment here. So pressing that on the iPad and pressing it again, I can take that off. So that, again, is an example of reducing the number of HDMI connections from a computer and running them across the studio and just putting it in a headless Mac Mini so that I can just control this over the network, even wirelessly from an iPad, rather than having to put that sort of over long HDMI cables. As part of that, the next one is Social Stream Ninja. So this is the way that I import the YouTube comments into H2R Graphics. So I'm gonna jump back over here to my computer, you can just view one display. So now we're just viewing the Mac Mini within, there we go. So I'm gonna get rid of my teleprompter. And where did it go? Down here somewhere. There we go. So it's H2R Graphics. And then we have Social Stream Ninja. And basically, once you download Social Stream Ninja, you can have it either as a Chrome plugin, although I kind of prefer using it as an application. Just lets me manage it better. And so there's an application on the computer. I've added my YouTube username at davidjoshuaford.com. I've signed in, and then that has opened this window, and it's scraping the data from there. And then on this sidebar, all you need to do is scroll down to, where is it? Under Mechanics, and then turn on Send to H2R Server. And then this address here, you'll see that the 7.11, that is my local Mac Mini that we're talking about. Port 4001, data, and then a number there. And over here on data source, I've turned on HTTP listener, and that is the same, what do you call it? Same listener code here that's pulling it in from Social Stream Ninja. So if I go over to Social Stream Ninja, that's where these comments as they come into YouTube are also going into H2R Graphics. And once they're in H2R Graphics, when I put them on air, then it's also logging that for my sort of personal archiving, and in terms of like when graphics went live on air. And it's also logging that in the YouTube comments as a chapter marker, like someone asked a question, and so it's easy to find. So that is all running on the back end there, and easy to manage when it's off my main computer. Let me go to, where's my Chrome? Let me go to Chrome. I'm gonna hide this one, make this a bit smaller. Chrome. Oh, I minimized it down here. All right, back and enter. Okay, so that is sort of the overview of what is on the Mac Mini and all these applications. You can see that there's a bunch of connections to equipment, and it's all going through a switch that I don't have to run long cables from the computer. That can be all consolidated into a rack. All right, let's move on to part 3, and I'm going to talk about the local computer applications. So I've moved most of these applications off my local computer and onto the Mac Mini. And so now we're going to look at what is staying on my local computer. And I'm really using it a little bit more as a remote workstation and something to present from. So from this computer, what's still going back to the rack is an HDMI cable, which is an output from my Mac. And like these slides that you see here, I've got my screen here, but I've got a copy of that going into the ATEM so that I can bring up a desktop view. So that's kind of like presenting slides or presenting a web browser. And then everything else is really sort of running over the network. So these are the applications that I'm running on, jump over here. These are the applications that I'm running on my local MacBook Pro M1 Max. So it's a couple of years old now, 2021, I think I got it, or whenever it came out. And so we'll work through these applications and what they connect to: companion satellite, Chrome, screen sharing, Cyberduck, Teleprompter, and ATEM software control. So my desktop really is looking like the computer, some Stream Deck hardware, and an iPad. So if I go to this kind of shot here, that's my Stream Deck, that's my iPad for the comments that come in, and then I've got my sort of computer here. It's actually, the laptop's under the desk here, but that's kind of how I manage that one. So let's start with companion satellite, and I'm just gonna hide this one and hide this one so that I can get over here because the companion satellite is what we're using to connect the Stream Deck XL's USB to companion. Remember I said USB is only good for sort of 15 feet and then it's going to get unreliable. So if you're trying to go longer distances, that's where you want to use companion satellite. And that's what I have on my main workstation. I've also just put that into my login items, so it just opens up and is running. So it means that anytime I plug a Stream Deck into my computer, it just automatically pops up. So let's take a look at that. So on my desktop, let's get rid of my teleprompter here. It is basically this app, where we companion satellite, that runs on the computer, and under here you can scan for devices, configure about or quit. So it's super simple. You just really need to put in your IP address of the Mac Mini because that's what's running companion, and then the rest of this you can probably leave. Once that is up and running, plug in your Stream Deck, and then under companion. So remember, because companion's network-based, I can look at, I can access and control companion over the network just by going to the Mac Mini's address, and then I'm using port 8000, and I can sort of flick through all of the things I need to control there. One of them is surfaces, and you can see down here, my two Stream Decks that I have plugged in here actually have the IP address of my MacBook Pro. So my workstation here at the desk is 7.16, and so these act like any other local connection. So the same as if I went over and plugged it into the Mac Mini. It now is just running via companion satellite, and I can sort of make all the changes that I want to control the Stream Deck. So that is how to control your Stream Decks via companion. The other one is I use Chrome or any web browser really to access all of these applications like Sheets and Slides and YouTube. I mean, it's probably self-explanatory, but just to give you an idea, H2R Graphics, I can access that in an iPad, or I can also access that just over the network. And so when I'm setting up a show, I usually come into variables, and this is where I put in my show title into the variables here. And then I've got usually 3 chapters and some sort of subheading, and that is the data that then ends up on screen and is also used in the metadata on YouTube. And it just makes it easy because I don't actually need to connect to the Mac Mini at all. I can just open up this, I've actually got it bookmarked, so just in my bookmarks bar here, I've got H2R, and so I can just click that, and then I'm in here, and I can, activate graphics as well. Where are we? Like that, and get rid of graphics. So I can actually run all of the graphics as well as adjust the variables. These are often like lower thirds, but I'm using them more as like chapters. So that's the way in which I run H2R. So the application itself on the Mac Mini, the HDMI connection out is on the Mac Mini, and that if you haven't set that up before, I'll just jump over to ATEM software control to show you here. So on the ATEM software control side of things, you'll see in my mix effects layer 1, key number 4, I want that on 4 because that's going to be sort of the highest level graphic that goes over the top of the other layers. And under upstream key 4, I've selected Chroma. I've selected the green that is being output from H2R. And you may want to do reset DB full if you haven't, just to make sure it covers the screen. And then I've just got it always on. And so anytime I run a graphic on H2R, it is putting that across. So you're actually looking at H2R's screen at the moment. It's just fully cut out. And so, you won't see anything until the graphics come on. But that's how that one works. We're sort of touched on this already, but the screen sharing is the app I use a lot also, and that's how I remotely operate the Mac Mini. So over here under, I'm just gonna minimize this one. If you just type in screen sharing, screen sharing, it'll open up like that. And then if you haven't got a connection already, you can go to connection, new connection, and it'll probably pop up with a box like this, which can be daunting if you don't know what you're looking for. But you're really just looking for the IP address of your Mac Mini. So I, under network here, under here, you'll see this is where on my local computer here is 192.168.7.16. So this would be the address that I would use if I wanted to connect to this computer. But for my Mac Mini, I know that it's .11, so I would just be sort of typing in 192.168.7.11 like that, and you would go connect. I'll just cancel out of this because I've already got it open. And I'll just drag this back on here. And so once you've done that, it'll open up there. Depending on what you've got set up, it may ask you to log in using the local login of that computer. Quick tip when you're setting it up, don't turn on file sharing because you won't be able to remotely log in. But that is what I've been using, not just here in the studio to access it, but also using VPN. So I run Ubiquiti routers mainly because the teleport feature of like setting up a VPN is super simple. You click a button, accept it, and there's no setup involved in it. So it's very easy, and it means that I can be at home and log on to this Mac Mini and make changes either to the live stream setup or to sort of media management, which I'll get into in another week. The other one that I do, which I was doing anyway, is just Cyberduck, which is a sort of FTP upload client. And again, it just is an example of remote management, so you're not having to have things sort of, connected from your computer. You can just do it over the network. So under here, it's just Cyberduck, which is a free application, and you will have, where are we? You can basically, my Hyperdeck has an address as well, 192.168.7.51 on mine. And so it just means I can open that up. I've got an SD card on here. And then like the show opener video that I was updating, I can just copy that in by just getting a Finder and dragging that in, and it'll copy it in. It's a bit more reliable, I think, than the Finder. Doesn't always do that with guest privileges, but that is Cyberduck that I use for the Hyperdeck. The other one that I was talking about was the Teleprompter app. So I just wanted to go over that again from the local input control, which is, again, so I've got this Teleprompter app here. I've got, the reason I keep this application on my local computer is it just makes it easy if I'm typing up show notes in Apple's Notes application or something like that, to copy and paste that in rather than having to, go into the screen sharing app on the Mac Mini to run it from there. So I run this locally in terms of inputting text and making edits. And then also on my, let me see what we got. Let's go to Super Source. I can show you over here. I've got a jog wheel, so I can actually control the teleprompter. And then, as I was showing you before, it's got the local screens that you can push it onto here, or else on the network, if you are logged into the same iCloud account and you've got the application open on both computers, then it will show up here on the network. I've got these 3 screens here, and so I can basically push this to go full screen on one of the HDMI outs of the Mac Mini, and I don't need to have a HDMI connection all the way from my workstation to the rack. So that's the teleprompter. And then alongside that was the slides, which we sort of touched on before. The advantage of the Google Slides is that because it's running on Google Sheets, so I've got, this is my list here, and then I basically in the same document have a tab called Next. And then that's the teleprompter that I'm looking at in one of the inputs, so that, and it updates as I sort of click through. Switch these ones out. And And let me see here. And so it just makes it super easy to manage my show. And I'll probably go into this in a couple of weeks in another episode, because it is making my shows much faster to set up. It means that I can sit at home or, you know, in transit on my phone and basically just like list out what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the Headless Mac Mini. I got 3 chapters. I got some subsections, and the subsections is where you can really get lost in the details. And so having like just little cards that sort of get me onto the next point, I find move me along. Let me know in the feedback if it's moving along, because what then I have, as I think I showed you before, on my Stream Deck is I'm then pulling that data from my list row. So I'm on list row 18, list 1, row 18, and it's going to be ATEM software control. So I know that, like, after talking about this teleprompter in Google Sheets, this is the next button. So I can just hit that if I get stuck, and then I'm off to the next point. And that actually updates my the teleprompter that I'm looking at, which is, I think, no, not that one. Let me just hit this one. So this is the teleprompter, so to speak, of Google Sheets that I'm seeing in my confidence monitor. And then my teleprompter here, that actually switches to show me the teleprompter up here for 5 seconds. When I click on to the next one, it's not gonna, as soon as I click, it's gonna cut to my face. So that's not gonna demonstrate that very well, but I've set up this button so that if it's a subheading, it's going to advance the teleprompter, put the text into my teleprompter full screen so I know what the next text is. It's going to cut to camera 1 so that I'm on screen introducing that point, and it's advancing the lists and making the logs in the background. And then after 5 seconds, it's switching my teleprompter back to the program view so that I can make sure I'm on the right shots and showing you the right things. So I will press that button now, and we're going to be going on to ATEM software control, which is I use mainly for adding images from the media pool. Again, it's kind of like the Hyperdeck. You're uploading images over the network, and then they're sitting on the actual ATEM itself, so you don't have to reference back to images across the network. So let's go to Hyperdeck. No, not that one. Software control, and I'll drag this one in. And I'll use it week to week. Again, really just dragging in these images. So this images I showed you at the beginning when sort of introducing what we're gonna be going through, and these were some of the slides that we had offset. So other than that, I'm really using the Stream Deck, but it's still handy to have the ATEM software control just to either troubleshoot things or bringing in images is the other way to do it. So hopefully that helped. I don't see any comments, so either something's up with that or no one's got any questions today. So that is that's good. So if that's the case, I've talked for quite a while. So next week we're going to take a look at a little bit more on the Mac Mini, because as I said, is really the heart and soul of the studio now. I was thinking the Mac Mini might be headless, but it really is the heart and soul of this studio, because it is something that's always on, always available, and it's just running everything around the clock. I talked today a lot about how I'm using this in live streaming and using it sort of as a server for Companion and to do things like shorten video out lengths of cable, so it's just in a rack rather than having to go from this workstation across the room. Highly recommend these. I think these are amazing as a media server, even just at home if you wanted a media server to sort of manage files or play things onto a projector or something like that. Let me take a look here. So yeah, so next week we're going to take a look at the Mac Mini and some headless setup tips, because it's not entirely straightforward. There's a couple of things you need to do to make sure you get it up and running and can monitor it remotely. Also, we're going to take a look at how to use it for the other reason I got it, which was the M4 Pro version, so the more powerful chip, because I've been doing a lot of encoding with it in the background, compressing my media archives, and also using it as remote render for when I'm editing in Davinci Resolve. So if that's of interest to you, make sure you come back to get part 2 of the Mac Mini. And until next week, take care, and I shall see you then.